Troy shifted uncomfortably, his hands clenching and unclenching around the water bottle. He knew he had to tread lightly, but the gravity of the situation was too serious to ignore. "Ron, you're playing with fire here," he began, his voice heavy with concern. "What do you mean?" Ron asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Online chatting with some woman while you're married. That's not right," Troy explained, struggling to keep his voice steady. "I told you. It's harmless." "Just a bit of fun," Ron defended himself, a hint of annoyance creeping into his voice. "But Ron," Troy continued, undeterred by his friend's resistance, "do you remember the Bible verse? Whoever commits adultery lacks understanding. He who does it destroys his own soul." "I ain't cheating, Troy," Ron retorted, his voice echoing off the factory walls. "You don't have to be in bed with her to be unfaithful, Ron," Troy argued, his tone softer now. "This could lead to something you might regret." Troy's words hung in the air between them, a harsh truth slicing through the camaraderie they once shared. Ron's eyes flickered with an unreadable emotion, but he said nothing more. For Troy, this was more than just a friend making a bad decision. It was a breach of a moral code he held dearly, one that valued loyalty and honesty above all. And as he watched Ron wrestle with his words, Troy felt a pang of disappointment and growing concern for his friend's marriage. Despite his warnings, he couldn't shake off the sinking feeling that Ron was venturing down a path he might not be able to return from. Ron's face turned a shade darker under the factory lights. The implication of Troy's words stung, causing a frown to settle on his features. Troy was right in his way, but Ron was not ready to accept it. "Troy, you're overthinking this," Ron finally said, trying to maintain an even voice. "It's not as deep as you're making it out to be." Troy opened his mouth to argue, but Ron held up a hand, silencing him. "It's my life, Troy, and I appreciate your concern, but I can handle this." The words came out more abruptly than Ron intended, a defensive edge slicing through their camaraderie. Troy, surprised by the sudden harshness, fell silent. He gave Ron a long, worried look before nodding in resignation. "All right, Ron, but remember I warned you." The rest of the day passed in uncomfortable silence, their usual banter replaced with an underlying tension that seemed to echo within the factory walls. And despite Troy's warnings still ringing in his ears, Ron found himself drawn back into the virtual world later that evening. Sitting at his kitchen table, Ron logged into his account. As the messages from the young woman popped up on his screen, he felt a thrill course through his veins. This was his escape, his way of feeling young and free again. Troy's warnings felt like distant echoes, easily drowned out by the exhilaration of the online chat. Every message, every word exchanged, seemed to validate Ron's choice, convincing him that it was nothing more than harmless fun. It was a path he was choosing willingly, ignoring the potential danger lurking in the shadows. And so Ron continued to live his double life, seemingly undeterred by the risk it posed to his reality, the warnings of a friend dismissed as he ventured deeper into the online world. The following days at the factory were marked by an unusual silence between Ron and Troy. Their easy camaraderie had been replaced by a palpable tension. While they still worked together, their conversations were limited to the bare minimum, focused only on work. On one of these silent afternoons, Troy watched as Ron scrolled through his phone during their break. His heart clenched as he remembered their conversation about the young woman. He knew it was not his place to interfere in Ron's personal life, but he couldn't shake off the nagging concern. "Ron," Troy said softly, breaking the silence that had settled between them. Ron looked up from his phone, meeting Troy's gaze. "Yeah?" "We're friends, right?" "Of course we are," Ron replied, confusion crossing his face. "Then, as a friend, I'm telling you again, be careful. This, whatever it is, it's not worth ruining your marriage or our friendship," Troy said earnestly, hoping his words would get through to Ron this time. Ron's face hardened for a moment, but he didn't retort as he had done before. He simply nodded, his eyes returning to his phone, leaving Troy to wonder whether his warning had made any impact at all. The workday ended with both men lost in their own thoughts. As they clocked out, Troy couldn't help but glance at Ron, his friend yet a stranger, standing at a crossroads. It was a tense, strained silence that followed them out of the factory, the echo of their fractured friendship reverberating in their hearts. It was a silence that spoke of concerns unheeded, of warnings dismissed, and a friendship that stood on a precipice, threatened by secrets and untold truths. Troy tossed and turned in his bed, the ceiling fan above him doing little to cool the guilt that burned within. Ron's dismissive attitude had taken its toll on him. Unable to sleep, he rolled over and picked up his phone from the nightstand. The bright screen illuminated his conflicted expression. He navigated to Facebook, his mind filled with thoughts of Ron and the young woman. After a few moments of hesitation, he typed her username into the search bar. The profile picture that popped up confirmed that it was her. She was young and beautiful, just as Ron had described, but looking at her picture gave Troy a pang of unease. She has no idea, he murmured to himself, thinking of Ron's wife, a woman who deserved better than what she was getting. He took a deep breath and hit the Add Friend button. "Troy, what are you doing?" he asked himself, his voice barely a whisper. He knew he was crossing a line, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to protect not just Ron, but this unsuspecting woman from the approaching storm. He left a simple message along with the friend request. "Hi, I'm Troy, a friend of Marine Shooterone, 111. I hope you don't mind me reaching out." As he set down his phone, Troy hoped he had done the right thing. He was tiptoeing around the edges of a secret, stepping into a world of lies and hidden truths. He wondered if he was ready to face whatever he would uncover, but the thought of standing by and doing nothing seemed far worse. His decision made, he turned off his phone, finally succumbing to sleep with the hope of navigating this tangled web come morning. In the quiet calm of their shared home, Brenda, Ron's wife, busied herself with her usual evening routine. As the aroma of a simmering pot of stew filled the kitchen, she hummed a cheerful tune, unaware of the storm brewing. On the kitchen table, Ron's phone buzzed, lighting up with a new message notification. Brenda glanced at it curiously. Ron never left his phone unattended. She hesitated for a moment, then picked it up. Her eyebrows furrowed as she read the sender's name on the screen, a name she didn't recognize. With a deep breath, she unlocked the phone, her heart pounding in her chest. There it was, clear as day. A barrage of messages from a young woman, the playful emojis and flirty messages stinging Brenda's eyes like hot tears. Her world came crashing down around her. She felt her heart sink, the pain so sharp it was as if she'd been physically struck. She quickly rifled through Ron's Facebook profile, discovering the old military photo and the fictitious identity he'd created.